Nobody tuned in to the 25th BET Awards, expecting quiet-spoken Tyler Perry to light the fuse. The room was buzzing for chart-topping performances, surprise collabs, and maybe a meme-worthy wardrobe malfunction standard award show fare instead. The billionaire filmmaker stepped to the podium, lowered his voice, and issued a calm, almost surgical rebuke that sliced through the air like glass. He never mentioned Meghan Markle by name, yet every syllable felt aimed with sniper precision. A story of lavish generosity repaid with silence, of blessings borrowed like they're owed. Social feeds exploded. Viewers snapped to attention. How had Hollywood's nicest guy reached a breaking point so public, so live, so impossible to ignore? To understand the blow, you have to rewind to 2020, the year Harry and Meghan bolted from Buckingham's gilded cage in search of freedom. Paparazzi were circling, tabloids were frothing, and security costs were skyrocketing. Enter Tyler Perry, self-made studio king with a soft spot for underdogs. He handed them the keys to his $18 million Beverly Hills fortress, bankrolled round-the-clock protection, even picked up stray bills that slipped through palace fingers. In public, it looked like pure altruism, one outsider sheltering two more from a storm of royal drama, but generosity has gravity. Months passed, Netflix and Spotify checks started stacking, and the thank you notes never came. Friends whispered that Perry's mansion felt less like a refuge and more like a credit line. Meghan kept expanding. Still, he stayed silent, convinced loyalty meant letting friends find their footing at their own pace. That quiet faith eroded the night she allegedly called his private jet a simple favor. His polite, no-meta flash of entitlement and the first real crack spiderwebbed through their friendship. Perry began to wonder, had he offered a lifeline or forged a chain? And that single doubt would snowball into a moment that shook Hollywood's confidence in Meghan Markle forever. The rupture didn't come with a slammed door or a tabloid headline. It arrived as a casual text on a Tuesday afternoon. Meghan asked if she could borrow Tyler's Gulfstream for a quick hop across the country, framing it as no big deal, just logistics. For most billionaires, a jet request is routine, but Perry, mindful of crew costs and insurance, gently declined. He didn't expect gratitude. He expected basic courtesy. Instead, sources say Meghan's reply landed like a thunderclap, sharp, indignant, stunned that he dared to say no. In that moment, Perry's mansion no longer felt like safe harbor. It felt like a debit card she'd finally maxed out. He'd replayed every unchecked favor. The private security bills paid without a conversation. The chauffeured cars, the open pantry. Suddenly, each gesture looked less like generosity and more like a running tab she'd never planned to settle. That single no cracked the veneer of friendship, revealing something colder underneath entitlement. Dressed as empowerment, but one clash doesn't topple a friendship. It merely exposes the fault line. And Perry soon discovered that line was wider and deeper than anyone on the outside could see. Once the jet incident scraped off the gloss, Perry couldn't unsee the pattern. Staffers confided that Meghan treated favors like poker chips, stacking them, cashing them, then vanishing from the table. Producers whispered that after securing introductions, she'd ghost calls, pivot narratives, erase people who no longer served the storyline. Even colleagues who championed her fresh start began muttering about unanswered emails and promises that evaporated the moment ink dried. On contracts? Still, Perry tried to give her the benefit of the doubt until the gratitude stayed silent while the millions rolled in. Netflix deal closed. No thanks. Spotify payout. Radio silence. Each windfall made his earlier kindness feel smaller, almost naive. He realized he wasn't the only benefactor left on read. He was simply the last one still hoping it was oversight, not strategy. That realization hit harder than any public accusation, because it wasn't a headline. It was a ledger of human debts unpaid. And when the man known for forgiving scripts finally tallied the score, silence was no longer an option. Next came the moment that turned quiet frustration into a quiet explosion. Perry's words on a live stage, spoken softly but felt like a seismic shock. When Perry finally stepped onto the BET stage, the auditorium hushed on instinct. He wasn't there to promo a movie or crack a joke. The air felt heavier, expectant. He began with a story, not a rant about lending a roof, a hand and a heart to someone navigating fame's crossfire. He spoke in warm tones, but the subtext was glacial. Then came the line that detonated Twitter timelines in real time. Some folks borrow blessings like they're owed, but never repay them, not in kindness, not in truth. No names, yet every camera operator, every viewer at home, instantly filled in the blank. The silence that followed hit harder than booze. Hollywood's ultimate good guy had just issued a warning disguised as wisdom. Generosity has limits, and his had been breached. Within minutes, clips flooded social feeds, amassing millions of views before the telecast even ended. Commentators replayed his words frame by frame, parsing pauses like forensic scientists. In those 3 quiet minutes, Tyler Perry a fairy tale as a cautionary parable revealing that the castle Meghan once escaped had simply been replaced by another she took for granted. But words alone don't sink empires. The aftermath to Zand, the tremors hit faster than anyone expected. By sunrise, inboxes across LA were buzzing with 2 words: pull out. A streaming executive who'd courted Meghan for a new docuseries nixed the deal before breakfast, calling the brand radioactive. A venture capital group, previously dazzled by her star power, walked away mid-due diligence, citing reputation risk. Even agencies famed for crisis management suddenly found their calendars full. Meanwhile, Meghan's PR team launched into spin mode, offering exclusive interviews, leaked photos, even a potential podcast rebuttal, framing Perry as out of touch. Yet media outlets, mindful of the mogul's credibility past, the harder they pushed, the more the narrative slipped. Twitter sentiment flipped from sympathy to skepticism. Hashtags once praising her pivoted into question marks about gratitude and authenticity. Inside Archwell, panic spread. Weekly budget reviews turned daily. Planned hires froze. Projects labeled priority on Monday were shelved by Friday. Investors didn't need proof of wrongdoing. Perry's reputation was proof, enough that anything was off. Hollywood, a town built on whispers, decided that if Tyler Perry felt burned, maybe they'd better step back before the flames reached them too. And that was only the first wave, because once the mogul's quiet revolt broke the dam, every unheard voice he'd inspired began flooding out. The real shock wasn't that Meghan took Tyler's help, it was how she later brand dropped him like a platinum credit card. Early 2024, she strolled into a closed-door funding meeting, pitching a new media venture that promised unfiltered female power. Halfway through the deck, investors perked up at a single slide. Tyler Perry listed as a silent backer. Phones buzzed. Word raced back to Perry's office before the meeting even ended. He'd never heard of the project, let alone co-signed it. That stunt rewrote the whole friendship in his mind. Every thank you he'd been waiting for morphed into a transaction she'd already spent. His name, earned over decades of sweat equity, was now a bargaining chip she flicked onto boardroom tables for leverage. Friends say that was the last straw. He'd tolerated the jet request, the ghosted texts, the unpaid debts of gratitude, but claiming his reputation as collateral, unforgivable. So when Perry stepped on stage at Bet, he wasn't venting gossip. He was fireproofing his legacy. By airing the betrayal in broad daylight, he made it impossible for anyone to quietly attach his name to her future deals. The statement was crystal: you can't weaponize a friendship that no longer exists. And once Perry unholstered the truth, other past allies realized they'd been holding their stories like loaded safeties. Within 48 hours, NDAs felt more like suggestions. A former assistant described Meghan's inner circle as gratitude, optional loyalty flowed one way. Criticism earned a pink slip. A Spotify producer revealed brainstorm sessions that died the second an idea upstaged Meghan's personal narrative. Even Oprah's camp, once her loudest champions, went radio silent. A void louder than any statement. Industry chatter turned into on-record quotes. Publicists admitted they'd been strong-armed to blacklist journalists who dared ask unscripted questions. A veteran consultant said working with her team was like negotiating with a mirror, everything reflected back as spin. Hollywood, normally allergic to public feuds, suddenly treated distance as due diligence. The avalanche didn't rely on salacious bombshells. It was the eerie consistency. Different departments, different projects, same refrain: control, manipulation, no reciprocity. Each new voice made the previous one harder to dismiss, until skepticism hardened into consensus. And as reputations calcified on one side, another domino, the public image she'd spent years curating, began its slow, unstoppable tilt. Meghan once powered her public image with a triple-charge narrative: feminist icon, royal underdog, self-made media visionary. But Perry's revelation snapped those story wires in one swing. Online sentiment flipped like a switch nobody saw. Coming hashtags that once cheered now dripped with eerie emotion. Fan accounts went quiet or changed bios overnight to taking a break. Viral memes contrasted her impassioned speeches on gratitude with leaked quotes from ex-staff describing a gratitude desert. Even supporters who'd defended every Buckingham headline found themselves stalling mid-tweet, no longer sure which version of Meghan they were defending. Mainstream outlets sensed the shift and hesitated. The morning show segments that typically recycled her empowerment slogans shifted to panel debates about celebrity entitlement. Legacy magazines quietly shelved planned covers. Brands that had queued up sponsorships began whispering brand safety and awkwardly drifting to other influencers. The speed stunned industry watchers. Months of polished messaging unraveled in days because the criticism came straight from a man universally respected for kindness. And while perception might not be everything, in Hollywood it's the first domino. Once the image cracks, money doesn't just walk, it sprints, which is exactly what the spreadsheets at Archwell started showing. Inside, Meghan and Harry's nonprofit, Morning Stand-Ups, turned into Emergency All. A streaming platform quietly reevaluated the couple's multi-year deal corporate code for Don't Expect Another Season. A six-figure speaking engagement evaporated after sponsors balked at shareholder questions. Even routine donations dipped. Small donors cited concerns about leadership as they canceled monthly pledges. By week's end, CFOs were running cash flow scenarios like storm track models, each projection grimmer than the last. Planned hires for the social impact team. Frozen, a glossy documentary in pre-production, shelved until conditions stabilize, which everyone read as never. Department heads were suddenly told to slash discretionary spending 40% and prep a bare-bones contingency budget. Internally, whispers turned into frank admissions. If another major backer pulled out, Archwell's runway would shrink to months, not years. Investors outside the foundation felt the tremor too. Venture funds, once dazzled by Meghan's star power, cooled overnight, citing reputation drag. One potential partner bluntly summed up the new mood. If Tyler Perry can't trust her, why should my LP? And through it all, Perry remained publicly silent. Silence that now sounded like a ticking clock, counting down to the next inevitable blow. Panicked texts flew from Meghan's phone the night Perry's speech aired, pleas, accusations even. Veiled threats about destroying everything we built. He left every bubble unread. For a man who built an empire on heartfelt storytelling, his refusal to answer became its own headline. Reporters noted the contrast. Meghan's camp, firing. Press releases like flares, while Perry simply went dark. In celebrity culture, silence from a trusted voice amplifies louder than a rebuttal, viewers assume. The quiet party holds the receipts. Each unanswered message underscored what insiders had whispered for months. Perry had been giving more than money, he'd been giving benefit of the doubt. And now even that account hit zero. The optics were brutal. Screenshots of one-sided message threads leaked, showing blue bubbles stacked on a sea of nothing. Fans called it the ghost herd round Hollywood. The absence of a reply stripped Meghan's counter-narrative of oxygen. Without Perry's participation, her explanations looked like deflections. Memes turned his silence into punchlines, late-night hosts into monologues, and executives into skeptics. That stillness, intentional, surgical, struck with the force of a verdict. And the moment that verdict landed, every quiet skeptic realized they were no longer alone. What began as murmurs behind closed doors cascaded into on-record testimonials. A veteran publicist revealed kill lists of journalists Meghan's team demanded be banned from junkets. A production designer recounted being ordered to reshoot scenes because lighting didn't complement the narrative. A former Arcuel consultant recalled strategy decks ignored unless they spotlighted Meghan's personal arc. Each account echoed the same rhythm control, spin, and a gratitude deficit. Numbers piled onto anecdotes. A national poll charted a 30% dip in U.S. favorability and an even steeper plunge overseas. Sponsorship analysts flagged her brand as high volatility. Studio bosses, never fans of risk, quietly adjusted greenlight spreadsheets. Markle projects flagged. Amber Perry collaborations flagged bright green. Even Oprah's team, normally a diplomatic bridge, maintained radio silence interpreted industry-wide as quiet agreement with every fresh disclosure. The narrative tightened. This wasn't a single spat. It was a pattern stretching across deals, platforms, and years. Tyler Perry's 3-minute parable had exposed the through line Hollywood insiders had tiptoed around for too long. And now they spoke freely because the biggest figure in the room had already broken the ice. Tyler Perry didn't raise his voice, slam a door, or drop a lawsuit. He told one cautionary story and then let the silence do the screaming. In an industry where image is oxygen, that quiet cut deeper than any tabloid headline, Meghan Markle, once exiled from the crown, now faces a second, more devastating banishment from the culture that once saw her as a symbol of reinvention. Because in Hollywood, trust is currency. And when the man known for unconditional generosity finally says enough, everyone listens. Wallets close, and doors once opened, in friendship swing shut in unison. The lesson Perry left hanging in the air is brutal in its simplicity. Borrow blessings if you must, but repay them and risk watching your empire evaporate in the hush of someone else's silence.